Perfect. Good morning to all, and welcome to everyone to Africa Summit 2026. I guess not all of us expected to see snow on the day we have African Summit, but here we are. Are you excited? Because we definitely are for a very exciting day in front of us, and it's great to see many of you in the room here, and we would like to thank you on behalf of the organizing team. This promises to be a thoughtful and engaging day of conversations around and about Africa. There's so much to say, so much to share, and also so much to be proud of. We will be your hosts today, and I present to you Samira from Niger, a master's student in MINT, Human Rights.
Thank you, Alexi. Thank you, Alexi, for this introduction. I am super happy to be hosting with you today, and I'm very excited for the thoughtful discussions we're going to have. So Alexi is also a master's student here at the Institute. He's from Benin and Geneva, and he specializes in conflict, peace, and security.
This year's theme, where vision meets momentum, is in the intersection of ideas and actions. We'll look at how aspirations around governance, development, culture, and justice are not only imagined, but also actively being realized, contested, and redefined in real time. We'll explore through the day themes that reflect said complexity. Our goal is to create a safe space and a space that is informative, reflective, and grounded in nuance.
So to kick off the summit this year, as part of the summit's commitment to celebrating African cultural expression, we're delighted to have a live performance. Please join me in welcoming Moyoga. So Moyoga is a modern traditional music group from Burkina Faso led by the versatile musician Kader Diabaté. They bring vibrant sounds of West African musical heritage to the stage. So now let's hear the remark and we can hear the performance.
Bonjour à toutes, Madame, Messieurs. Je me présente, je suis Kader Diabaté, l'artiste musicien d'origine burkinabé, Burkina Faso, pays des hommes intègres. Je vous présente ma chanteuse Fatoumata Dambélé. Elle vient du Mali, d'origine malienne. Je suis très heureux d'être ici ce matin devant vous. Merci du fond du cœur pour votre présence et surtout votre énergie. Je suis ici pour vous partager mon univers et mon passion. Je vous laisse présenter.
Alors, bonjour tout le monde. Guten Morgen. Je m'appelle Fatoumata Dambélé. Je viens du Burkina Faso et du Mali. Je suis griotte, tradie moderne. J'habite au canton de Berne et je suis mariée à un Suisse, 22 ans. Je suis très heureuse de partager ce matin avec vous. Je dis bienvenue à notre grande dame du Sénégal. Je la connais, elle se bat pour l'Afrique. Alors, bienvenue tout le monde. Merci.
Et merci beaucoup, Madame Lou, pour l'invitation.
Merci à vous. Allah. Merci.
Thank you very much, Moyaga, for setting the tone so beautifully, with rhythm, beats, and power of Africa. Excuse us. Now, let's get into it with a quick overview of today. First, we'll begin with opening remarks from Hadi Faye and Karis Ribi. Then, we'll follow into a panel exploring themes of narratives around troubled history and impact on Sudan's conflict today. Then we'll take a lunch break where you'll be able to have light snacks, and you'll be finding this in the lobby. After that, after lunch, we'll have a workshop on Pan-Africanism and democracy.
We will then hear remarks from Gallery Brohart, who have kindly displayed a selection of artwork curated by African and Afro-descendant women artists at the Fab. We invite you to take some time during the summit to just go check it out. Following on that theme, at 3:15, we will rejoin for the last panel on African creativity. Finally, will be time for closing remarks by our co-director Jennifer Xiao and co-lead Malak Afifi. We look forward to hearing all the discussion from our panelists, moderators, and of course, you, the audience. But before beginning, please join me in welcoming Hadi Faye, or ASA co-director, as well as Karis Ribi, our co-lead for the summit this year.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, mesdames, messieurs, chers collègues, chers invités. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the Afrique Students Association, it is a real pleasure to welcome you to this year's Africa Summit. Nous tenons à vous remercier d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. Votre présence compte réellement et elle donne déjà tout ce sens à ce moment. My name is Hadi Faye. I'm from the Gambia and I have the privilege of serving as the co-director for this year's Afrique Student Association for this academic year. I'll not take too much time to talk about the summit itself, as one of our wonderful co-leads here will introduce it more holistically, and you'll have the entire day to actually experience it. However, I would like to take this moment to tell you more about ASA. ASA is built around a simple idea of creating spaces where people can meet, exchange, and engage meaningfully, while also shaping what Africa means to us as students in an international environment. These spaces are safe, not to tick boxes, but also because all perspectives and people are welcome. Guided by our Constitution, we are inspired by the ideals of Pan-Africanism, by generations who have worked towards unity, solidarity, and cooperation amongst Africans and Afro-descendants. This year, that has meant being intentional about how we bring people together, how we create room for discussion, and how we ensure that people are not just present, but actually heard in these spaces. It also means recognizing that these spaces matter, especially in environments like ours, where conversations can sometimes remain abstract, a little theoretical, and disconnected from lived realities. At the heart of this is also shared responsibility for all of us. As Frantz Fanon reminds us, chaque génération doit, dans une relative opacité, découvrir sa mission, la remplir, ou bien la trahir. So each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. And in many ways, ASA is part of that effort and is an attempt to engage, to question, and to contribute in our own way to that ongoing mission, a mission that keeps advocacy, community, and interactions, as well as support for those that came before us and those that will come after us at its heart. And on a little bit of a personal note, my journey with ASA began last year as a first-year representative, and it was a moment where I was stepping well outside my comfort zone amongst a group of strangers. But very quickly that changed. I met people who were open and engaged and genuinely welcoming, and that changed my entire experience. It showed me that this kind of environment does not happen by accident. It is built, sustained, and passed on. So when the opportunity arose to become co-director alongside a wonderful Jennifer that is here behind us, it felt like the right step, even if we initially wondered, are we really ready for this, or are we fit for this? Cependant, comme on le dit souvent, il faut se lancer avant d'être prêt. And today is proof that when people commit with a shared vision, things do come together, although not always super easily. And of course, none of this would exist without the incredible work of our team. I look to all of you with a lot of gratitude. Thank you so much for dealing with our many demands over the past couple of months. So as we begin, I encourage you to be present, to be curious, and to engage fully throughout the day. Je vais m'arrêter ici et donner la parole à Karis, avec qui nous avons eu le plaisir de construire ce sommet pour la suite des remarques d'ouverture. Merci.
Thank you, Hattie. Thank you, Jennifer. So hi, everyone. My name is Karis Ribi. I'm a first year here at the Institute. I'm Nigerian American. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this year's Summit on Africa, entitled Anchoring Africa in the Present, Where Vision Meets Momentum. We are truly grateful to see such a strong and diverse audience here joining us today. Students, practitioners, scholars, members of the community, each bringing curiosity, insight, and a shared interest in engaging more deeply with the continent. Too often, conversations about Africa are framed either through the lens of the past or projected far into the future, focusing on what has been or what is to come and what could be. While both are important, they can sometimes obscure the richness, the complexity, and the urgency of what is happening now. This summit is an invitation to shift that focus, to anchor Africa firmly in the present, to recognize the dynamism, agency, and momentum shaping societies, communities, and political realities across the continent today. As we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge those who made today possible. My sincere thanks to our speakers for their time, expertise, and willingness to share their perspectives with us. To our sponsors, thank you for your generous support for helping make this platform for dialogue and exchange possible. To the Institute, we're grateful for your guidance, for providing this space, and for offering us this platform to engage with these timely and important topics. To the Summit leadership team and our volunteers, thank you for your dedication and hard work over the past months. This event would not have come together without all of you. And finally, thank you all for being here with us today. We hope that today encourages you to question assumptions, engage critically, and leave with a deeper, more textured understanding of Africa in the present. Thank you, and I now welcome our MCs back to the stage.
Thank you, Hadi and Karis, for your dedication in making this day come to life. I am now delighted to welcome Ezra Al-Fadil to kickstart our first panel on understanding Sudan in context through colonial legacy, global discourses, and modern conflict. Ezra is a Sudanese British student currently pursuing her LLM here at the Institute, and she's currently working with the International Humanitarian Law and Youth Initiative. She will be joined today by Abdelbajir Jibril, Eva Herr, and Roman Descartes. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Samira for the introduction. As most of you are aware, on April 15th, 2023, clashes erupted between rapid support forces and the Sudanese armed forces in Khartoum and quickly spread to other areas. As a consequence, millions of people were forced to leave their homes and seek shelter. Many were killed or injured. Around 30.4 million people, more than half of the population of Sudan, urgently need humanitarian support. Even before the outbreak of war, humanitarian needs across Sudan were at record levels. For years, millions of people have been internally displaced and living in refugee camps and emergency shelters. The armed conflict has plunged Sudan into the greatest refugee crisis in the world. For this panel, we are seeking to deepen understanding of Sudan's ongoing crisis by examining both its historical foundations and current realities. Often overlooked in global conversations, Sudan's conflict is rooted in complex intersections of colonial legacies, global discourse, and media narratives, as well as contemporary political struggles. The session aims to provide a clearer picture of where things stand now and to identify practical avenues for informed engagement and action. Let me now introduce you to our panelists. Joining us online is Dr. Eva Khair. She's a Sudanese British medical doctor, a global health and humanitarian consultant with over a decade of experience in Sudan-related crisis responses, policy, and advocacy. Her work focuses on civic and human rights, social protection issues, and international development. She leads the Sudan Transitional Consortium, a network of Sudanese professionals addressing conflict and humanitarian issues and advancing peace peace building across Sudan, the region, and the diaspora, working closely with international and grassroots partners to develop community-driven strategies. She is the founder of Women for Sudan, a global solidarity campaign highlighting the war's impact, particularly on women and girls, and pushing for meaningful protection of civilians. She's a parliamentary advisor on Sudan and former health and human rights diplomat to the UN. Next, we have Dr. Roman Deckert. He's an independent analyst and publicist who has studied contemporary and historical Sudan since 1997, beginning with an internship at Goethe Institute in Khartoum in Sudan during his studies as Ruhr Universität Bochum in Germany. His academic focus is on Sudan-Germany relations. Since 2009, he has served as a senior researcher on Sudan for the Berlin-based non-governmental organization Media in Cooperation and Transition, leading journalistic and cultural projects. He previously worked on small arms exports at the Berlin Information Center on Transatlantic Security, and his article appears in many of the German journals. Finally, we have Mr. Abdelbagi Jibril. He's a Sudanese Swiss national born in 1962, a president and founder of the Swiss-based Sudan Knowledge Center, and serves as the main representative of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies to the United Nations and other international organizations in Geneva and New York. With over 30 years of experience, he has expertise in global human rights and development issues, representing international and regional organizations with the United Nations system. He has contributed as a civil society expert to major conferences, including Rio in 1992, Vienna in 1993, Copenhagen in 1995, Rome in 1996, Durban in 2001. He continues to advocate for human rights in Sudan while supporting the training of Sudanese civil society actors. Now, before we start, I just want to give you a brief structure about this panel. We're firstly gonna have a rapid opening round with one question and give the panelists the option to answer, and then a moderated conversation. Then we are gonna open the floor for questions. And lastly, we're gonna ask the panelists to reflect on one of the questions. And just a quick note that Dr. Eva will join us for 50 minutes, and we really appreciate her time that she devoted to come in despite all the commitments she has today. So let me begin with the first question. And please provide your views on this based on your knowledge and expertise. What is the most critical misconception about Sudan today and its ongoing conflict, and why does it matter? I will start with Dr. Eva, please. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Bon matin. Hello. Nice to see familiar faces on the panel and to join you this morning for a critical conversation on Sudan. And thank you for putting it on the table and starting the summit with it. I think common misconceptions. Normally, I wait until the other panelists have had their go before I drop this one. But since you've given me the privilege of starting first, I think really the civil war narrative, the civil war discourse is the one I find, as the sort of most flattening, unfortunate, gross misconception. This is not a civil war in the way that we understand civil wars, where populations rise up against each other, or sort of a tribal war. In that sense, it's not like what we saw in, the genocide in Rwanda, for example. This is very much the state attacking its civilians. This is a war on civilians. It is not simply a civil war. And the other aspect of this is that it's a war on civilians because the Sudanese population dared to mount a popular uprising and revolution against a 30-year dictatorship, an Islamist dictatorship that was headed by ex-President Omar al-Bashir. And so this war is actually a counter-revolutionary war. That revolution rose up in the very last month of 2018. It continued into 2019, and after a spate of massacres and pushback from the state, essentially the ex-president was ousted, and the military essentially staged its first coup, hijacking the revolution. But then we had a period of transition, COVID hit, and then the military and its paramilitary aligned section essentially staged another coup on the civilians, and then we ended up in a war. So really, this is a counter-revolutionary war. It's not a secret that it's a counter-revolutionary war. In the weeks and months leading up to the April 15th, 2023 outbreak of all-out war, when the belligerents fell out with each other, essentially, the political machinery, the politicians, the Islamist faction behind strategizing the war was essentially goading the Sudanese public and threatening and telling them that they would have revenge for the revolution and for being kicked out, for the dictatorship of Omar Bashir being kicked out. So I think I'll leave it there for now, but essentially to say that the civil war narrative is the first thing we have to counter. It's a war on civilians, it's a counter-revolutionary war, and we must remember that when the media, when policymakers, when politicians speak about civil war in Africa, that has real impact. It switches people off. They stop listening. It's yet another civil war in a dark, distant, dusty place that we don't need to engage with. They're always in a mess. Let them sort it out. And we'll come to narratives later. But when you have a war where civilians are dying in massive numbers and soldiers are being allowed to march out untouched, where you have, civilian deaths outnumbering soldiers' deaths. And, the safest thing to be in Sudan right now is a soldier. Being with an armed actor is safer for you than being non-aligned with an armed actor. It really tells a big story. I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eva, for explaining the misconception briefly and why the civil war matters. And I'll switch now to Mr. Deckert.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Ahlan wa sahlan, marhaban bikum. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's actually, I should mention what brought me here. It was actually Sudan that brought me here, because my wife used to be a delegate with the International Committee of the Red Cross in Sudan. That's how I met her. So I usually say all roads lead to Sudan, Ana Sudani. And it's great that you put this focus on Sudan today. Very happy. I have a slight bit of criticism, actually, when I looked at the map. So Sudan is very dear to my heart. So is South Sudan. And actually, my South Sudanese friends, they would not be very happy to see South still united. I was very much in favor of unity in the 2011 referendum, but of course we have to respect that the South Sudanese decided to secede. So I would suggest next time maybe you can add South Sudan. Forgive me. So actually, Dr. Eva, she destroyed my whole concept because the first two words I have on my card are actually civil war and counter-revolution. Yes, I totally agree. I could not agree more. The war in Sudan is often called a civil war because that's usually understood, a war inside a country, but even that is not true in that sense, because all of the neighboring countries are now involved. Yes, it is a counter-revolutionary war, people should know that it's a very proud tradition in Sudan, of Sudanese civil society. It's not 2018-19 was not the first revolution. The first one was in October '64. Then there was another one in April 1985, long before what's called the Arab Spring. Now, there are, of course, several root causes that we're going to talk about later. Actually, just 10 days ago, I visited the Théâtre Pito F for the FIFDH, the film festival, Human Rights Film Festivals, and there was actually the sister of Eva, but she's fully in her own right, a very prominent analyst, Khulud Khair, and she pointed out that there are different levels, of course. There's the national level, which has got a lot of root causes, the conflict on the national level in Sudan. We're going to talk about colonial legacy later. And then often overlooked there's the local level, very important, and also a regional level. And I think we're going to talk about the regional level, i.e. it is also a proxy war between competing, especially Gulf monarchies who have no interest in seeing grassroots democracy blossoming in their backyard. But the one point I would disagree with Khulud on that, and I mentioned that, is that there is also a fourth dimension, and that is the global dimension. And that is, to me, the most important critical misconception. So it's often talked about as a forgotten war. It is not forgotten. I mean, the Sudanese certainly have not forgotten about that war. It is rather a deliberately ignored war. Especially when it comes to media attention. And my theory would be that it's, again, very complex web of reasons for that ignorance, but one of them is that it's a very inconvenient truth that we as especially Westerners, have very much to do with that war. And that means my country, for instance, Germany, in the past had a very key role in the militarization of Sudan by pumping in lots of arms, weapons, training, and so forth, was setting up the Sudanese mukhabarat, the so-called security apparatus, which rather spread insecurity. And that may be a thing of the past, but it still lingers on. It still has an effect today. You see a lot of German small arms in Sudan, but even worse, officially, if you go to the website of the German Foreign Office, you will see that the United Arab Emirates, for instance, are officially a strategic partner of Germany. And there are many other countries, UK, Austria, I recently did a bit of research, but also we are here in Switzerland, which is also clean, very peaceful, Maison de la Paix, you know, very beautiful, great, International Red Cross, I love it. But then if you look at it very closely, you know, last year, Switzerland imported more than 30, gold worth more than 30 billion with a B, billion francs from Dubai. Now, it's no secret that the war is financially fueled in Sudan by gold, as well as in other countries, South Sudan, Central African Republics, and so forth. And it all goes to Dubai. And so much of that gold ends up here, where there is some kind of a tradition when you think about the Nazi gold, apartheid gold, you know, so welcome to Switzerland. It goes on, you know, oil used to be a main driver of the wars in Sudan. One of the companies was a Swedish company called Lundin. Its founder, Mr. Lundin, you have one guess, where does he live since he became a billionaire? Welcome to Geneva. He lives here as a well-respected citizen of this city, and it goes on and on. South Sudanese oil has been traded big time in Geneva through Trafigura, making its founders billionaires. Surveillance technology from Israel has been sold to the RSF militias in Sudan, and it was paid through Genevan private banks. So to me, it's very important also when we speak about later what can we do to break the cycle. I think we very much have to look not very far. Dr. Eva said, you know, there's very often this racist undertone, it's ethnic violence, as if ethnicity was the cause of the conflicts. You know, of course, these conflicts have been ethnicized, But when you look at it, ethnicity itself is a very dubious concept. It becomes very racist. When you look, the lines are very blurred, intermarriage and so forth. So very much this tribal war, makes people think like, oh, these Africans, that's how they are. They are meant to kill each other, or sometimes I even get applause from the right-wing corner when I say it's the Emirates who destroy the country. Oh, that's how the Arabs are, So that those kinds of narratives. So I leave it at that, that I find it very important to look at the global dimension, at the hypocrisy by Western countries who are so obsessed with migration, refugees, and so forth. And the biggest refugee crisis in the world is caused by our strategic allies in the region.
Thank you so much, Mr. Deckert, for expanding Dr. Eva Khair's point so elegantly and powerfully. Now, moving to Mr. Abdelbagi.
So thank you very much indeed, and good morning, everybody. I must say that I am extremely pleased and honored to be part of your summit this year. And it was really a powerful moment for me to be with you. And as a Sudanese, to see as well that you are placing the matter of Sudan on top of your agenda. I appreciate that. And before proceeding, let me recognize the moderator, His Excellency Ali ibn Abi Talib Mahmoud, the former permanent representative of Sudan to the United Nations office here in Geneva. So, Mr. Ambassador, thank you for coming. And also, I wish to recognize the presence of my dear colleague, Dr. Patrick Lessen, the director of the Center d'Etudes Juridiques Africaines. Thank you, Patrick, for coming, as well as our dear friend and sister, perhaps some of you know her, Awandiai. She is also there supporting us, coming from Senegal, Central African Republic. And of course, to all of you. Actually, I prepared myself in a classical way, according to the information that I have received. And because of time, and we are so busy actually with the Human Rights Council, which is now taking place in Geneva, so I was not able really to follow up all the last minutes, amendments to the presentation and the style. But I welcome actually the opportunity of having this kind of interactive dialogue with you. But before that, I really have to say to you, thank you for your concern about your continent of Africa. As you all know, Africa, as other continents of the world, has its own challenges with peace, security, and the promotion and protection of human rights. Now, we are actually in a new global dynamic. I think you all know about what I talk. That means Africa has to reposition itself. It has really to change the old modus operandi that we all know, because now we are in a new setup. And from here comes the importance of this kind of dialogue and discussions, because really people can advance ideas, can give up-to-date information, which will help shape the future course of action, which is changing. There is no doubt about that. And I'm very, very glad to be part of this session with you, students of today, leaders of tomorrow, and also scholars of tomorrow who can really make a change. Of course, Africa is not one. And of course, addressing the situation in Sudan as well, it has really to be taken within the African context. Africa is not one. There are some regions that are really, one can say, democratically vibrant, economically prosperous, and there are those regions that really live with armed conflicts, with misery. And unfortunately, Sudan is one of them, my own country, where my family is there. And you can, from here, you can understand how, the attachment and how one will be emotional to address this unacceptable situation. Coming to the misconception, and I think this is a very right question really to ask. As somebody who has been following what is going on in the country for long, My concern is really about the full understanding of the extent of the problems of Sudan. And the simple questions to be asked is that why Sudan has been in war with itself since the independence in 1956. It's quite a long time. Actually, the armed conflict and war started in Sudan in 1955, 1 year before the independence, and it continued. We just have 10 years, 1973, 1983, where we have peace all over the country, no war. After that, the whole thing collapsed. Are you imagining what I'm talking about? From the independence of the country, that's over 70 years ago. All through this period, with the exception of 10 years, the whole time it was war. I think it's very, very simple question to ask. Why? What is the problem of Sudan? This is a valid question. And I think offering the right answer to it is also important and essential to understand as a conflict and dynamic. And it was very good that you have referred to the colonial legacy left behind in Sudan. And this is very crucial and very key for people really to understand. Sudan is quite different from other countries. It is almost, you can say the gate between Africa or sub-Saharan Africa and other regions of the world. Sudan has been a country of migration, and it, by the way, still Sudan is a country of migration. People come from different parts of the world. That was a historical process. And then Sudan was also victim of colonial rule that started in 1821 or 2021. That was the Ottoman colonial rule of Sudan. It has lasted for over 60 years. It ended in 1885. And then from 1898 until 1956, we have the condominium colonial rule of Sudan. That is Egypt and Britain. They rule the country together. This kind of relationship, it was based on one very simple thing: exploitation. Sudan is a rich country. There is no doubt about that. It has so many different kinds of resources. And this is why, colonial scramble of Sudan has been an important one. And from the very beginning, the first actually colonial masters of Sudan, when they came, they were driven by two things. They want resources, human and material resources. And by the way, before that colonial scramble, in the modern context that we all know, Sudan also had a very bad experience with the slave trade, especially the Trans-Sahara slave trade and Trans-Arabian slave trade. And of course, you all know, whenever a society was victim of slave trade, that means devastation, that means underdevelopment and destruction. So all these things, we have to take them into context. Because colonial masters actually in Sudan also took advantage of one thing. Sudan is an African country. It is, of course, officially color blind. However, the Sudan is composed of two groups of people: those who identify themselves as Arabs and those who identify themselves as Africans, or you can say Arabized Africans. And by the way, this is just a question of self-identification. People decide they belong to this race or the other race. That was good, no problem about it. That created some kind of melting pot. We have a diverse society, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multilinguistic. The problem is that these differences were misused, first by colonial masters, and they left us a legacy of people who are, I can say, lost, frankly, as speaking. A legacy that created some kind of conflict, some kind of discrimination, by the way, and some kind of rejection of the other on things that scientifically cannot be proved to be correct. And I think from here, that should be the starting point. The conflict of Sudan is internal conflict. It is a Sudanese conflict. It's a conflict of identities, conflict of cultural orientation. And recently, we have seen also, the emergence of political Islam, which has complicated the whole situation in a very unacceptable way. Solution should be a Sudanese. Sudanese should really sit down. And by the way, Sudanese are competent to sit down and diagnose the problem and also prescribe the remedy. We have a very big community of scholars, of, one can say, statesmen, politicians who know. We know the problem, by the way. In our discussions, we talk about it from different distinct backgrounds in the country. We agree. Unfortunately, when people come to fix the thing, to implement, then the problems comes, and then the failure show its way. So, Madam Moderator, I hope I didn't talk long, because I am just emotional, perhaps you have noticed.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for explaining the layers underneath what's happening currently in the conflict. And it was really neatly explained and was comprehensive. Now moving to Dr. Eva, because I know your time is tight. So my next question to you is, why has Sudan remained relatively marginal in global discourse? And how has the way it is framed internationally shaped responses to the conflict?
Thank you, and thank you for accommodating me in your questions and timing. I think, when it comes to the marginal aspect, the marginalization of the Sudan war, I think, Dr. Roman really hit the nail on the head. This is not a forgotten war, it's a deliberately ignored war. And, why is it marginal? Because it's kept there. It's a political decision to do so. And when we think of, political interest, leads to media interest, which leads to public interest, which leads to media interest, which leads to political interest. We have these cycles and these axes that are firing off in lots of different directions, always complementing each other and chasing each other like day and night. And so when there isn't political interest or attention, or it's politically expedient not to focus on Sudan, not to get in the way of those regional interests and even those global interests, as Roman described, then you get the sort of the states that are classically looked at to have the duty, the legal duty, to intervene or to mediate on what's going on in Sudan. For example, like the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is very important politically because it is penholder on Sudan at the UN Security Council and at the Human Rights Council. And so there are speeches, there are sometimes organizational mechanisms like the core group on atrocity prevention, which has just been birthed in Geneva a few weeks ago, and various other mechanisms, but they haven't really translated to anything impactful on the ground yet. It's some attention, it's not using the full heft and the full diplomatic or political arsenal that we have at our disposal to shape what's happening in Sudan, and particularly to intervene and to stop the war meaningfully. And I think just when it comes to the shaping of responses, the media aspect of it is very, very important, because the narratives that are being built in the media are influenced by a little bit by public opinion, but very much by political will. And the two sort of do very powerfully play off each other, and the public can either influence politics and media, and they can also be influenced by it. And I think we're seeing media interest or disinterest and political, half-hearted interest and engagement really influencing how much attention the public pays. Because, at the political level, Ukraine gets a lot of attention. Ukraine is dealt with by heads of state. Sudan is dealt with by envoys and the pet projects of foreign secretaries who come and go. It's, that really shows a deep prioritization. And I think, Mr. Jibril described very, very well the kind of ethnic aspects of some of what's happening in Sudan. And, and I think the scale that Roman described, that, Hulud used in terms of, local, national, regional, global, I think, that the ethnic tensions cover maybe local and national, but they don't touch regional and global. And we really can't talk about the global discourse and how sort of particularly the UN system, the multilateral system, or how member states are dealing with the Sudan crisis, or in fact not really dealing with it. Beyond the sort of framing, I think there is also an issue in terms of the context that Sudan finds itself in. The war in Sudan broke out in April 2023. Then we had October 7th, 2023, with the attacks in Israel and the subsequent war on Gaza. And essentially, that has been a very powerful conflict that is, of course, playing out in the popular imaginary. And so, publics and institutions, politicians, policymakers, diplomats, the UN system, even Geneva, are all reckoning with multiple large crises, Sudan in scale and size, excuse me, but Gaza in sort of, I think, poignance and history. And, Sudan's war in the way that it's happening is 3 years old, and Gaza is 80, essentially, the Palestinian question and the crisis in Palestine. And so, there are different tensions here as to what gets media attention and what doesn't. Now, does media attention always translate, or narrative, powerful narratives that have public backing always translate into effective policy? Not necessarily. Gaza has all the attention in the world, and things are only getting worse, even under the guise of ceasefire. So public attention, media attention doesn't necessarily bring you good policies. What that comes down to is really the regional and this global picture, right? And that's where towns like Geneva, the multilateral system, states' ambitions and diplomacy and interests, because a lot of what drives diplomacy and how member states engage with each other is the trade, is the interest of the powerful, of the billionaire class, of of commerce, of industry, of neoliberalism. So when we think about colonialism, we also have to think about the neoliberal, extractive, colonial project. So it is linked, it is related, but I think when it comes to the sort of shaping of discourse, we have to look at every single level: local, national. The belligerents are shaping discourse, their backers are shaping discourse. We have powerful countries in the Gulf who are paying media mercenaries to attack civil society, to denounce researchers, to spread all sorts of misinformation, disinformation campaigns. And of course, this war is raging online as much as it is on the ground, because that's a dimension that we now have to global warfare, or to even regional warfare. So there are lots of tensions in this game. But I think I'll leave it there for now and allow some time for coming back. And just to let you know, I'm with you for another 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Eva. And I know that it's critical that when people see our conflict, they always compare with others around the world, but without understanding that it has a historical reasons, and it's not like one day event that emerged suddenly. Yeah, I totally agree. And thank you so much for explaining everything very, very on point. And so I'm gonna move to Mr. Roman. I want to ask you, which colonial era structures or decisions still shape Sudan's political and social fractures today? And how do they continue to influence the current conflict?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, Ustaz Abdelbagi also took away my first 2 points, which were slave trade and gold, basically. I mean, it's quite spooky. There's a line of continuity right from the pharaonic times. I mean, the Egyptians, who were actually at some point ruled by the Sudanese, they don't like to hear that, but mostly the Egyptians, they went to Sudan to basically rob slaves, people,
and gold,
as mercenaries, and gold. And we see it still today. I mean, the RSF militias, they became so powerful because its leader basically sold, 16-year-old boys to the Saudis and Emiratis to do their bloody, dirty work in Yemen. And when the war cooled down in Yemen, they came back to Sudan, and the war there started there. So there is this line of continuity. I mentioned gold before, and especially also the role of Switzerland. So this is a continuous topos, if you like. And Ustaz also mentioned that Turkey, the Ottoman rule in the 19th century, which really took this slave trade to new levels and destroyed a lot of the social fabric that we still see. And I think one legacy, obviously, it's a very heavy colonial legacy. I'm going to mention more a little bit later, but of course, you cannot blame everything on the colonial legacy. I mean, Sudan has been independent for 70 years, exactly 70 years. We should be celebrating actually all year now. Instead, we are mourning. But there is, of course, also some Sudanese responsibility. And I think one of those responsibilities is what you also alluded to, is the internal racism, basically. And I would recommend to everybody who hasn't seen the movie yet, Goodbye Julia. It was actually premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, I think 3 or 4 weeks after this latest war began in Sudan, and it showed, of course, the excellency of Sudanese culture production and its potential. And there you can really see this internal racism. It's about color sometimes about the thickness of your hair. Your great-great-grandfather perhaps was a slave, that kind of thing. So this still is part of Sudanese society nowadays. When we mentioned the British colonial rule, it was, to be precise, an Anglo-Egyptian condominium, but because Egypt was de facto under British rule, it was de facto a British colonial rule over Sudan from 1899 until end of 1955. Remarkably, the Mahdia that you mentioned, it was the first time in 1885 that an indigenous uprising managed to kick out foreign colonizers, the Egyptians at the time. Unfortunately, it was not the best kind of rule, very hardcore Islamist, if you like. Also slave trading, but it's worthwhile mentioning it. So when the British took over Sudan in 1899, nowadays a lot of Sudanese, understandably maybe, have a romantic view of the British rule because the roads were very, clean and very orderly. There have been some surveys in Sudanese online platforms which was the best rule in Sudan, and the British rule actually wins. But of course, when we look at it very closely, a lot, if not most of the problems that we see today originate from the British rule, as, by the way, if you look at many other, messed up places in the world, you will find there used to be British colonies or Palestine, So to me, it actually was an eye-opener after more than 25 years, 2 years ago. I went to London to the annual conference of the Society for the Study of Sudans at the SOAS, and there was one presentation about the 1924 white flag movement. Again, that movement should have been celebrated all year long. Instead, because of the bloody war, it was just not even a footnote. And it's a very proud moment in Sudanese history. It was an egalitarian, anti-colonial movement that was actually suppressed in a very bloody way by the British. And one of the leaders, for instance, of that movement, Ali Abdelatif, was a descendant of Southern Sudanese slaves. So it was not just the usual suspects, the university students and, the upper echelons of Sudanese society, but it was barbers, shoemakers, so forth, who were all over the country, not just Khartoum, because that's one of the problems of Sudan, and it's very Khartoum-centered, but it was all over the country. And it was actually interesting, earlier this year, I was contacted by the German public broadcasting system, radio system. They did a feature on Sudanese independence. So I went back to the library. I checked out some books, how actually the independence came about, so rather smoothly. And it struck me that this white flag movement was actually in these books was considered to be like an insubordinate, rowdy kind of event. So I was quite shocked. Those books were maybe 20, 30 years old, so a lot of history actually has to be reconsidered as well. One consequence of that suppressed revolution was that the British colonial rulers established local elites, mainly from the center of the country and the Nile Valley in the north. And their descendants and networks are still dominating or have been dominating Sudan after independence as well. So this is one of the main grievances that we see in this conflict of the marginalization of the peripheries versus the developed center of Khartoum, which is like an octopus, sucking all the resources from the peripheries. And when you see the TikTok videos of RSF soldiers when they commit their war crimes, they not only boast about their war crimes and shouting abuses at their victims, but they voice grievances. Of course, they don't legitimize their behavior, but they do voice grievances about this marginalization and lack of political representation in the center of Sudan. So this is something that still continues today. Another point is basically that the British set up the Sudanese Defense Forces, which became the Sudanese Armed Forces, the army. And if you look at all the rebels, all the militias today, they are basically all spin-offs of the army. The British historian Peter Woodward has called it's an army with a state. Usually, as a political scientist, Max Weber, you learn, that a state has legitimately an army. It could be perhaps questioned, but in Sudan, it's the other way around. It's an army with a state. It's like a mafia with an official flag. The army took over, basically, and this is a legacy. You have a lot of rebels. They spun off the RSF militias today. They were created by the army and the so-called security apparatus.
Sorry,
Would you like to?
Mr. Dekertia, Dr. Eva raised her hand. I wonder if she has a question or intervention.
I can wait for Roman to finish.
Okay,
Yeah,
no
I'm soon finished. So there is, of course, I could go on and on for hours. There's more legacies. The British established this monoculture in the economy, for cotton production south of irrigated scheme south of Khartoum, which of course also came to haunt Sudan because it was so reliant. And when the oil price shock came in the 70s, it all collapsed and so forth. So we see the repercussions of that still. Another important thing to mention, Stasis mentioned it also before, is the conflict in what was then southern Sudan. Basically, the British closed it off. There was a closed district order, and they did no development, left it to some missionaries. So when independence came, the southern Sudanese were totally unprepared and totally dominated by the northerners, and so this insurgency in southern Sudan broke out. So this is the colonial legacy. I mentioned before the role of my country, which basically, there was a proxy war between West and East Germany in Sudan. So you had this kind of neo-imperialism also during what we call the Cold War, which was a hot war there, basically. So we always have to question all these terms, how to use them. And now we see neo-imperialism by the Emiratis, also by the Saudis, and other Gulf countries. So imperialism, neo-imperialism is an ongoing theme. I mentioned before that I think Sudanese have some responsibility themselves. I feel after, I feel also Sudanese in my heart somehow, so I dare to bring up this criticism. I would claim that there is a big problem of the patriarchy and toxic masculinity in Sudan. Again, I would refer to Goodbye Julia, the movie, which really demonstrates it very well, I find. You don't have to be Sigmund Freud, to see all these big men sitting like this with this stick waving, how to make sense of that. So I think Sudanese, once this war is over, have to ask themselves some hard questions concerning that. But I would like to end by saying again, the British rule, I mean, the most shameful, really, thing in the past few weeks that we've seen is that a Labour government in the UK has cancelled visa for Sudanese students, other students as well. So we have all this colonial legacy, and what do? It's a Labour government, a minister with the surname Mahmoud, she cancels all the visa for Sudanese students, because 120 or so of them sought asylum. So they try to be more right-wing than the right-wingers. And I mean, this is just utterly shameful. And I would urge you, it's just a few feet away. If you go to the Place des Nations, you can stage a protest in solidarity with your Sudanese fellow students in the UK. You could not go there because also I see Free Palestine stickers, that's great, but I would like to see Free Sudan and solidarity with Sudan stickers. And if you wonder, it doesn't make any sense. I know from my archival researches in Germany, particularly, that even relatively few letters of protest to the German government, to parliamentarians and so forth, did put a lot of pressure on the ministerial bureaucracy, and it's one part. So we are not powerless, especially for my experiences, the Emiratis. They are very sensitive when it comes to the risk of reputational loss. So I think we do have some leverage that we can use to show solidarity with Sudan. Only the Sudanese can save Sudan. That's true. I don't want to come across like someone with a white savior complex, but we can assist them, support them, at least by not being complicit with the perpetrators. So that is the message, the main message that I would like to bring across.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Oh, and one more thing. So it would be great if you stuck with Sudan, and there's actually on Monday, the Geneva Press Club is hosting Mini Minawi. So Mini Minawi is not only the one with the coolest name of all the Sudanese warlords. He's a real warlord, former rebel, now governor of Darfur, and he will be at the Geneva Press Club in Prigny, and you could go there and check him out, and hope to see some of you there.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dickert. I don't know if Dr. Eva, you have an intervention or a question, and maybe also before you leave us, if you could give us last remarks, please, that would be great.
Of course, thank you. And it's great timing. And actually, I want to take not the Mini Minawi point, but the Roman's previous point about the international community not being complicit. And I think, in terms of the kind of, lobbing back and forth of power changing hands, revolutions, coups, and so on, I think we've had the most coups in Africa, and Sudanese responsibility. I think when people say Sudanese responsibility, I think about 6 years ago, when it was the youth of Sudan, the people of Sudan who went out on the streets. And during the transition, less than a year later, the international community conspired against the revolutionaries and demanded military guarantors to the transition. So actually, dear Roman, I think when we talk about Sudanese responsibility, it is very difficult to extricate it from international culpability and complicity, because the UK, the US, Norway, and others, seemingly good friends of the civilian transition, seemingly good friends of democracy, seemingly good friends of these kinds of processes, essentially thought, no, an African country cannot possibly, its civilians cannot possibly manage a country with these resources. We need the mafia in town. We need the guns. We need those who have been pillaging the state and who these very people rose up against. And that revolution was led by women and by youth. And so when we think about beating the machismo, and the international community conspires to restore the macho men and their guns, there's something to do there. I think when it comes to, local skirmishes break out everywhere. Look at the January 6th, when Trump didn't like the results that he got in the election when Joe Biden won, the race riots we had in the streets of the UK in 2024 and some again last year. You know, Sudan may have its race issues, but the thickness of your hair doesn't start civil war and it doesn't keep it going. And I think we also have to think about the fact that there are ethnic tensions in every country. I live in the UK. Look at how what the English think of the Scots, the 800 years of colonial rule in Ireland, and how they even feel about the Welsh as somehow second-class citizens. You know, and Scotland, for example, voted. They had a referendum to leave, just like we, and they could have birthed a new country in 2016 after South Sudan left, the greater Sudan and became a new country. So I think we also, when we talk about colonial narratives and how we see Africa and how we see Sudan, we must always paint the corollary with what's happening in the seemingly developed, established, comfortable, democratic world. We must always paint that picture and not forget that. And, you know, when it comes to, for example, democracy and democratic transformation, let's not forget that Sudan elected its first woman MP before Switzerland did. That was 1965, Fatima Ahmed Ibrahim. Before, was it Elizabeth Kopp? I think we really need to remember that Sudanese youth, Sudanese women, time and again, raise their heads above the parapet, go out on the streets with nothing but claps and poetry in their hands and in their mouths, and are always striving for better, always striving for equity and some semblance of a democratic life. But it keeps getting bashed down. So I would say this is only the beginning of a conversation. Thank you to the program. Thank you to the Geneva Graduate Institute and my dear fellow panelists. I hope to see you again. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in Geneva this time, but please follow the Women for Sudan campaign. You know, get in touch. I'm happy to connect, and I really hope to see you in Geneva again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Eva, for joining us and providing your insights and contribution to this important panel. Really appreciate it. And I wish you the rest of the good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the last question is for you, Mr. Abdelbagi. Looking at Sudan today, what are the most critical developments that the international community is overlooking?
Thank you very much. Indeed. There are so many very interesting points that were made really earlier. And just 1 minute. The question of marginalization of Sudan within the international context. This is really a question that personally, I look, at it with mixed feelings in a way, because it's not that really mathematical answer to say 1 + 1 = 2. And this is for so many things. But the most important thing to know is that Sudan is the scene of intra-war. It's an internal conflict. It's really not a conflict of international nature or regional nature. And here comes the responsibility of the Sudanese. These are the ones who can really fix the situation if they agree. And I fully agree with you. This is the responsibility of the Sudanese because we are the ones who created this armed conflict. Of course, it's connected with other elements, but we cannot also blame the past. Yes, we have the colonial legacy, very important for us, and one of those, matters that were left behind untackled until now is the emotional division among the Sudanese people, and that shapes every and any action that they undertake. What is the question that you have said? Sorry?
Looking at Sudan today, what are the most critical developments that the international community is overlooking?
All right. Now for us in Sudan, the most important thing is really peace. Because this conflict is just massive, it's just unimaginable, in which all forms of human rights are violated. International humanitarian law as well is violated in a very massive way. People are dying, as simple as that. Almost every week. This has to come to an end. Then the humanitarian suffering it is also massive. We have at least 25 million people who are in need of food assistance. People barely eat a meal a day. And those people usually, or the majority of them, are internally displaced. They don't live in their homes, whether these are destroyed or because of insecurity they have to leave. And then we have the IDP camps, specifically in Darfur, where people lack all necessary things: food, medicine, proper shelter, potable water, down the list. Things that you really hear of and things that you do not come to your imagination. However, the international community was not silent. There were so many world conferences on humanitarian matters of Sudan. In Addis Ababa last year, I remember in February, and then again in London, in Paris last year. And next month, a humanitarian conference for Sudan will take place in Berlin, Germany. In all those meetings, people come and they commit themselves to help ease the humanitarian need in Sudan. They give money, as simple as that. And then the UN agencies are active, almost. All those major UN agencies, they have a presence in Sudan, and they are trying to help the victims of these atrocities. And by the way, in Sudan, we have plenty of food, plenty of, of life-saving material. Unfortunately, the victims in certain areas of the conflict, they do not have access to food, which is available in the local market. And this is for a very simple reason. Unfortunately, the two warring parties, they implement some kind of a policy intended to starve people in this area or the other area. It depends who is there. The army will not allow food and life-saving material to reach places under the control of its rival, the paramilitary, the rapid support forces, and vice versa, by the way. And perhaps some of you have followed what is happening in one city called Al-Fashir in North Darfur last year, in October last year, where people were starved for almost 2 years. They were just prevented inside that city of accessing any kind of food. They ended up eating actually animal fodder to survive. Can you imagine that? So in a way, this humanitarian situation and even famine is really man-made. It was by design. Simple as that. And then comes the attempts for peaceful negotiations or a peaceful end to the armed conflict, which is normal. The international community and the regional community, by the way, the African Union and also our own small organization in the Horn of Africa, the IGAD, or the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, they did their best. And then also some states like Saudi Arabia, like the United States, they tried their best to bring the two parties to the negotiation table so that they can agree on a peaceful settlement of the conflict. But the end result was rejection of any attempts. And by the way, the army really played a major role in rejecting all proposals to end the conflict through peaceful means. Even they rejected a call for a humanitarian ceasefire, just to stop the war for 1 month, 2 months, so that we can allow the international community, relief organizations to access people who are in need. Those were rejected. So the two parties in the country, they are determined to pursue military victory. And for that, the young fighters, they were indoctrinated by the two parties to go fight the war, either come back victorious or die as martyr. This is the language, actually. And this is the mentality that sustains and maintains the war. In this case, I think it's really not fair to come and say that Sudan has been marginalized by the international community. I don't think it's fair. Let's be frank as well and see where is the problem. In Jeddah, for example, in 2003, in May, a very good starting document was adopted, agreed upon. Then Switzerland took the initiative last year or the year before, I think. There were 2 or 3 meetings held here in Switzerland to find a solution. The United Nations also took leadership, proposing some suggestions, some ideas just to ceasefire. The IGAD countries. And here there's a very interesting story. In December 2003, the head of the army went to a meeting of head of states of the IGAD, and he agreed with them on a document that can bring peace, or at least humanitarian ceasefire for a while in the country. Then when he went back to Port Sudan, that was, refused and rejected. And then the whole thing continues like that. At the end of the day, let us come back again and say this is a Sudanese responsibility, and the Sudanese are the ones who really can find a solution for it, especially the humanitarian, suffering, which is just unbearable. And if there is no cooperation, there is no partner from the army and the RSF, that is the Rapid Support Forces, which is fighting against the army, then nothing can be done. Those who dare to send humanitarian relief material, for example, inside the country, they just simply get attacked and killed. They destroy hospitals, they attack, humanitarian convoys who are bringing food, medicine. They just shoot them, or they send those, long-range drones to attack them. And in the process, people die. Now, the biggest stick for change is, of course, local, there is no doubt, and this for so many, things. And I don't count on an intervention from the international community or from even the regional community to come and enforce and send soldiers to come and try to fix the situation and protect people. And this is simply who is going to send his troops? Who is going to fund those troops? No one. So the blame should also be, when we place it, it should really be logical. And the most important thing, we should really go directly to the roots of the problem and see where that thing should be addressed. Because really it's not good, to give somebody who is sick with malaria, to give that person the Falgan or paracetamol, which will just take the headache, for example, fever. But after a while, the whole thing becomes again because you didn't treat the disease itself. So the first thing is we have to diagnose the illness. We have to see exactly what kind of remedy that should be and who is to do what. This is very important. And first and foremost, the Sudanese people themselves, and then perhaps people from the region itself, which is to some of the Sudanese are less problematic to deal, for example, with African states, with African institutions. And this for a psychological reason, or can say, or political reason. And then we come back again, also the question of religious fundamentalism. And you see, political Islam. These are very important things that people also have to really to take them into consideration, because in Sudan, they played a major role in destroying the country during the last, say, 30 or 35 years, in which Sudan was ruled by a totalitarian regime that, adopts two kind of doctrines, one based on Islamic fundamentalism, and the other one is on Arab centrism. And that to the determinant of the majority of the people of the country. And from here, the whole system collapsed. This is one of the things that people have really to take into consideration in the future when you discuss what is going on in Sudan, and specifically what can be done to fix the situation. So I stop here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdelbagi. And I became emotional because it's such a heavy topic and it's touching for me as I'm also from Sudan. But it's really heartbreaking when you don't see or know how to help as like someone in Geneva as well. But I really hope, as you said, like it's for Sudanese people to act. And I really hope that in the future, people collaborate and try to do something meaningful.
You are helping. By organizing this session, you are helping. So
Thank you so much.
you should never underestimate. Yeah, just one point, if you allow me. People really should not underestimate efforts that you make here and there in your small corner. Because such efforts can be the difference between life and death for a woman, for a child, for somebody somewhere, you see, in Sudan or in other places where they have conflict. And I have seen this with my eyes. I have some experiences. So you are doing your best as you can. And I think we cannot ask you for more. So thank you very much for this.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Maybe we can now move to question and answers.
Okay.
Thank you all so much. To open up the Q&A, we have a question from our online chat from Amen Mengistu. And she says, it is important to discuss the international input in the current conflict. So she has two questions. One seems to be a disregard from the Arab and Muslim communities. And additionally, it has been revealed that Ethiopia participates in the genocide with training centers for the RSF. And Ethiopia has also been excitingly buying Dubai gold. So what can we do to hold these countries accountable? Best, we can also gather questions to answer. If there's any questions.
Thank you very much. My name is Ali Mahmoud. You are the former permanent representative of Sudan to the UN in Geneva and also ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein. Thank you very much for organizing this important event. You are really contributing to bringing to light the very catastrophic situation in the Sudan. I would like also to thank Eva, Dr. Roman, and my dear friend Abdelbagi Jibril. First, I have a question. How can the Sudan crisis be pushed up the global political agenda despite the fact that it is the most catastrophic in terms of human suffering and geopolitical impact? Two practical proposals for those who are meeting in Berlin next month on the 3rd anniversary of the Sudan crisis. We do not want more general statements of good intention. We need concrete action. As we speak today, there is a problem facing almost 250,000 students who are supposed to take the secondary school exam. The country, practically, as we speak now, there is partition. The government in areas controlled by RSF are insisting on having their own exam, and the government in Port Sudan is going ahead with its plans for the high school certificate exams. So we need something concrete to address the situation, humanitarian truce, whatever. Also, Abdelbagi referred to the recent attacks on civilian infrastructure, especially hospitals. Yesterday, there was major attack on a market in a locality in 200 kilometers west of Al-Fashir. And the same goes to areas on the border with Chad. So these are practical issues that need really to be addressed. And I thank you very much for bringing to the attention of the audience this recent decision by the UK government to deny visas for students who got permission, admission to some universities. Thank you very much. And once again, I would like to laud you for this great event. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Wissam Albi. I'm the Regional Director for Canada's International Development Research Center, responsible for the Middle East and North Africa. My question is, I mean, you all spoke very eloquently about the different interests in Sudan, and my question is more practical about the concrete incentives or pressures that could actually change the behavior of armed actors in Sudan, and who has the leverage to apply them without worsening harms to civilians?
Thank you. I'm Hisham Taha. I'm the director of the Center for Humanitarian and Development Excellence. First of all, I thank the panel for the insight, and I thank Afrique Students Association for always putting Sudan on the agenda. I was part of your panel last year, and please keep it up because that is needed. Two questions. My first question is there any room for optimism on the efforts by the quartet, given that three of them are belligerents actually in the war in Sudan, and the fourth one is benefiting from the status quo, that's the Americans? I think Sudan is in fact in the place where most of the actors who are involved in this war would want it to be. Many of the countries need gold and need gum arabic. The belligerents in Sudan, they actually need weapons, and they're getting that in exchange. Secondly, I'm giving some of the pointers that I see evolving quite clearly. Trump would not want to choose between the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and both of them want different outcomes of this war in Sudan. Thirdly, we are seeing that decisions on this war are neither in the hands of the belligerents, nor are they in the hands of their sponsors. So given all these elements, is there any room for optimism, the work of the quartet? An extension of the question is what we have seen in Sudan, and the panel has spoken about the country seeing war for 60 years of its 70 years of independence, but also the country has seen 50 years of military rule. And by extension, I think politicians in Sudan have failed the country, I believe. They have failed the country by the choices that they have repeatedly made over these 20 years that they ruled. But more importantly and more worryingly is the army, the military people, the people who are armed, who believe that they have the divine right to govern the country. So my question is that this is the overarching problem, which is a problem of governance actually in Sudan to solve before we look at the cascading and the waterfall of other problems that we have in Sudan. Thank you. I'm sorry for being too long. I acknowledge Ambassador Ali. Thank you.
Thank you, and I believe we have time for one last quick question before we pass it over.
Hello, my name is Siam. I'm an advocacy and policy officer at the International Humanitarian Law and Youth Initiative. I had a question regarding, so mostly the one affected in this war in Sudan are youth. The average age in Sudan is 18 years old. And we can also see that rape is a weapon used to terrorize population. Mostly women and girls are affected by it. My question is that I think we're no longer in a point where resolution is enough. We need action. So how can we really effectively use women, peace and security and youth peace and security in the case of Sudan in order to really empower young people, not just include them, not just ask for their participation, but generally ask for their voice to be heard, because the majority of these people being affected are young people just like us. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will, one last question, and then we'll hand it over to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. In Ethiopia, the region Amhara is under siege for 3 years. We have massacres, no school, rape, drone attacks, everything. State-sponsored genocide. We would like also that to come to the table. We have Congo, South Sudan. When you cried just now, I felt you. I cry also each day. My colleague cries each day. What can we do? Conflict forgotten. What can we do?
Thank you so much. I think now we can turn over to the panelists.
How many hours do we have? Yeah, maybe I'll just quickly start. The question about Ethiopia, the first one. Again, I mean, I'm not an expert on Ethiopia, but from what I understand clearly is they have been bought by the Emiratis. The Emiratis, they buy everybody. I mean, you know, in Africa, they bought Chad in the first place. So Chad flipped to be the conduit for the supplies for the RSF. And they just bought everybody, including Western countries. I mean, you know, the Louvre has got its only outside branch in Abu Dhabi. I mean, everybody is getting bought by them. And so my recommendation would be, yeah, just don't be like Sharmuta. I mean, it's, you know, people, countries shouldn't prostitute themselves. And it's quite remarkable that the Emiratis even continue. I mean, you should think that in these days they have better things to do than continue the air bridge to the RSF in Darfur. No, what they do is, you know, even though it got more difficult for them, they continue to send cargo planes every day to the RSF, and now it's via Ethiopia, for instance. And apparently Ethiopia has agreed, because of their own ambitions, to get a seaport in what is now Eritrea to host the RSF and their allies. So there is a problem here when it comes to international law, because apparently Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia has understood that in this age you can basically just lay claim and stake to foreign countries, and it's quite legitimate. I mean, including my own country, you know, it's very selective when it comes to IHL and international law in general, you know. So in Ukraine, international law is welcome. When it comes to Palestine, Israel, no, you know, we shouldn't look at it, so forth. So it is, you know, we are here in this capital of international, and especially IHL, so that's certainly part. I mean, when it comes to pushing Sudan to the global agenda, I think it is very difficult. We should also bear in mind, I mentioned my South Sudanese friends, you know, ask them how much media coverage they get. You know, nothing at all. But to be a bit cynical, I believe maybe the Sudanese should do it like the Swiss. So the Swiss, basically, they sent the boss of Rolex to Trump, and he put a very nice Rolex and literally a big piece of gold on the desk of Trump, and then apparently, you know, Trump can get interested in Sudan. But of course, we shouldn't rely on it. Concerning the Berlin conference, I happened to have calls with the Sudan people in the German Federal Foreign Office just last week, just 1 week ago, actually. And yesterday we had a call. There is a network of German NGOs coordinating advocacy in terms of Sudan. I think the expectations, they're not very high, but you have to I mean, the main goal of this conference is to keep Sudan on the diplomatic agenda. That is the number one aim. But I would also say, I mean, to be not too depressed. Things in Sudan, they seem to go on and go on forever without end, but sometimes they can flip quite quickly. And this happened in previous wars. So we should not give, I mean, we just have to go on and on. We have to try our best to continue. Concerning, did I understand you're from Canada? ICRC, okay, right. I mean, concerning incentives to the warlords to stop the fighting, we should remember also that they were brothers in arms until 3 years ago, literally brothers in arms, Hemeti and Burhan. So they can come together. We've seen it before. I mean, I remember there's one picture of Hassan al-Turabi, the Islamist leader, Sadiq al-Mahdi, his brother-in-law, who he actually made a coup d'etat against and put into prison, and Omar al-Bashir, who put Turabi into prison, and they were sitting very jolly on a boat on the Nile for a wedding party. So these leaders, they get along quite well. It's the ordinary people who pay the price. So there are incentives. I think for the fighters, it is all about livelihood, because if you're a 16-year-old or 20-year-old in Sudan, the only way to get a wife or send funds to your family is to sell your fighting power. You have to be a fighter. So there are some people from the same family, they're fighting on different sides. So the answer is livelihoods for the people, on the ordinary people, but also perhaps for the leaders. I mean, bit stick and carrot approach. Also, we haven't mentioned it, but one key motive is impunity. No one ever has been taken into, had to take accountability for all the war crimes and genocides we have seen. There's only one exception. Recently, I think in November, one Ali Khashab, he was at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. He got a sentence of 20 years or so forth. So that was a very good sign. It took 20 years. So countering impunity is certainly key. So people have to know that they will have to account for what they do. Rooms for optimism. I would mention something that we haven't mentioned before here, which must be mentioned. It's the emergency response rooms. Maybe some of you have heard of. They come partly from the neighborhood committees from the revolution. So there is a Sudanese strong tradition of solidarity, of sharing and caring. And these emergency response rooms are largely driven by young people. Actually, they have taken over the basic tasks of the state, providing some kind of security structure, social structure, food, education, and so forth. So they're really the hope. They will be present in Berlin, I understand. And when it comes to youth also, I mean, this is, so I work in journalism, and my organization is actually is organizing a background talk between German Foreign Office officials just before the conference and Sudanese journalists. And, the usual suspects were first in line. These are old men, some of whom are my friends. I'm an old man myself now, actually. But we have to, so in the selection of participants for that event, for instance, we have to, of course, take great care that young people, young women in particular are represented. And I understand, for instance, German Foreign Office is trying to do the same, which is quite hard, actually, to have such representation at the Berlin conference. The one hope that I find worth mentioning is that actually Saudi Arabia is going to host the World Football Championship in, I think, 34. And some people argue it's not in their interest to have all this mess just in their backyard. So they would be interested to have a pacified situation in Sudan. By then, also because tourism is like their new business model for the future. So it's a bit hard to put your hope on the Saudis and Trump and so forth. Of course, the Iran war is putting a new dynamic on things. I mean, I wish war on nobody. I must admit, though, that when I see pictures of smoke rising from Dubai, I not only feel that what goes around comes around, but that it puts a new dynamic into the whole situation because their business model, I think, is collapsing, you know, and so hopefully that will guide them to more reasonable policy approaches. I see some hope there, and yeah, regarding the military rule, I mentioned that before. To me, it's the core of the problem. But when you look at the core of the core, you have this colonial legacy of these traditional elites, and I mean, in Sudan after 1956, basically, who put the military into its place? It was this competition between two royal families. So you had the Mahdi family and the Mirghani family with their religious sects, you know, who were also quite Islamist. I mean, they were not considered to be Islamists in the modern sense of the word, but they were quite conservative Islamic sects and orders, and they were the royal families of Sudan, and the one royal family in the competition with the other put the army into place in the first coup d'etat. So, and then in those times when they were ruling the country after that, they also messed up the country big time. So you have under the military rule, and for many people, the military was just the only way to climb the social ladder. Again, we come back to the issue of livelihoods. You know, so if you don't have any, I mean, Omar al-Bashir, it was his only choice to, you know, become a social climber to make a career in the army. So I think we have to bear this in mind. But yes, I'll end by saying that ideally the military would go to the barracks. And I mean, I think they have been a total shame of the country. Many people have actually become fans of the army, arguing it's legitimate institution of the country. I would claim that they have lost their legitimacy a long time ago. I mean, they were already pursuing scorched earth genocidal policies in the 1960s. So they have never fought any outside invader, which is the only task of an army. You know, even Halaib Triangle is occupied by Egypt. They never bother about, you know, liberating that Sudanese area from the Egyptians. No, they have only fought ever their own people. So this army is a total disgrace. They should go back to the barracks and vanish and leave Sudan to the civilians, to the youth, and those proud traditions that I've mentioned before.
Thank you so much, Mr. Deckert. Mr. Abdelbagi, if you have any answers for the questions.
Yeah, well, I wish to thank those who intervened actually for their questioning and comments, which are also pertinent. And I think, Mr. Ambassador, you have, I think, raised very crucial matters. A question of pushing the political agenda. Berlin conference should not be another talk show. And the most important, I think, point that you raised about students. And of course, to push and continue pushing the political agenda, that can really be done through policy advocacy. That's the thing that we know. Of course, people can use other means, you know, to advance the agenda, especially direct contacts, you know, with political decision makers in the different capitals. So people, if you have access to deputies, etc., then that can, you know, help if you have the opportunity to talk to them, give them some ideas and suggestions and requesting them for action. Because the problem is that, you know, my observation is that sometimes political decision makers, they know the problem, of course, and they know the solution, but they need somebody to encourage them to go forward. Sometimes you can find, you know, a political decision maker, a very important person in a key position, he doesn't know the problem. Or if he knows the problem, he doesn't know what to do about it, solution. So with those guys, you have to inform them, and you have to propose to them some ideas and some action to be taken. That is the only way. And of course, really we have to use all, elements that can help us, which we can have access to as well. And those who can help us, whether these are religious people, people in the entertainment industry, opinion makers, thinkers, writers, down the list. It's not possible, it's not impossible, but it really needs some kind of consistent action. And take into consideration one thing. People know what is going on, by the way. Almost all, members of the international community know what is going on in Sudan. So the mission here is not that very complicated. Then, the question of students, and this is very crucial and very important, and I think it will also, concern you. Do you know that in Sudan we have about 19 million school-age students and university students as well? During the last 3 years, they just don't go to school. Can you imagine the knowledge gap that we will have when this war comes to an end? Do you imagine the efforts that is needed to qualify those people when the war comes to an end? Just to qualify them with simple things, with the ability to read, for example, or write, and to know numbers, let alone the ability to use artificial intelligence and all these, innovations, which are very crucial and very important for any society in this time to develop and advance and to be competitive in the regional and international market. So this is a big challenge, and it has really to be addressed in a way or another. I don't know how. I'm not in this field, but something has to be, and very urgently. Otherwise, we will face another big problem in the near future when the war comes to an end, because we will just find people who are illiterate. And you all know people who do not know what is going around them, capable of doing what kind of damage. Do we still have 3 minutes?
5 minutes, yeah.
No, 5 minutes. All right, so now there is also the question of incentives and leverage, and I think this is very important. The war in Sudan, although it is internal, but it's really sustained by external forces who benefit from the wealth of the country. Sudan exports, according to the Minister of Finance last year, Sudan, for example, and this is one field, the gold. Sudan exports 20 tons of gold last year through the official channel of governments. But do you know the official production of gold in the country? It was 70 tons. So 50 tons were just disappeared. No one knows where they are. They are there on the records of the ministry, but no one is held accountable for exporting this. And do you know who is exporting that? These are people who are working with the official government army. And in areas under the control of the so-called rebel movements, no one knows the production of gold. One of my friends told me that Sudan at least produces 200 tons of gold every year, which makes it the largest producer of gold in Africa. Unfortunately, 90% of this production is smuggled outside of the country through neighboring countries. And from here, I think you can see the stake from this just one product. And then add to that agricultural produce, add to that cattle export, and so many other things. So there are some countries who benefit directly from what is going on in Sudan from the economic point of view and trade point of view. Do you know that Sudan exports gold to the United Arab Emirates until now? And do you know that Sudanese gold is exported illegally and sold at half the price, of the international price, because it is not, through the international monetary system. So I think this also makes a big complication. Countries like Egypt, for example, and by the way, like Eritrea, they are involved in the fighting in Sudan. They participate directly in it. But people don't talk about them. The discussion is about the role of the United Arab Emirates and how they support the rapid support forces with drones, with ammunition. This is nothing compared to the intervention, the direct intervention in the fighting. All right? And my sister from the Amhara region, of course, we share the same destiny. We are neighbors anyway, and we will be neighbors forever. What is going on in your region affects us, and what is going on in Sudan, affect. And by the way, I come from the eastern part of Sudan, so I'm not far away. But I know what is going on there. And let us work together so that we can really help. Yeah, so I think, I'm sorry, really, the time is now over, although there are some points that one would have loved to address, but anyway.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Mr. Al-Jibril, and we appreciate that, there is a lot to talk about, but we hope that you got like a holistic view about what's happening in the ongoing conflict. And please join me to give them a big round of applause.
Thank you very much to Ezra Al-Fadil for guiding this important conversation on Sudan, but as well, thank you so much to our speakers here. Your insights have been very, very, very big and good contributions, and thank you so much, and definitely a lot of food for thoughts for us. And of course to you, our audience, for the questions. We are sorry that we have to cut this short, but time does go when discussions are being had. And we will now break for lunch. You will be finding finger food out in the hallway, and we will from lunch from 12 to 1. And we invite you to get something and to take time to connect with one another. You can keep asking questions and keep having discussions. We are our connections, so make sure that it is an opportunity for you to make these connections.
And before we break, I would like to take a moment to thank Hamada for kindly providing us with bisap. So for those who haven't tried it yet, bisap is a traditional African drink enjoyed all across Africa, and it's made from hibiscus flowers. Hamada is a Geneva-based brand dedicated to crafting natural hibiscus infusion that celebrates broad tradition and community, so be sure to try their drinks in the lobby. We will regroup at 1:30 and hear remarks from our sponsor, the OIF, and continue with the workshop on Pan-Africanism and the future of democracy. Have a good lunch.